Ditcheva with the third round finish!
Everyone saw the tall girl from Manchester with the long limbs and the calm walk to the cage. What they got was something far colder. She does not just beat people. She ends nights early and leaves faces changed. This is Dakota Ditcheva, and the women who stepped in with her keep learning the same hard lesson. Opponents talk beforehand. They stop talking after. The question is simple and it will not go away. How does one fighter keep turning every match into a short, violent story that ends the same way? She arrives looking almost too composed, too measured. Then the first exchange happens and the cage suddenly feels smaller for the woman across from her. Reach that should not exist at flyweight. Timing that lands before the other fighter even finishes her thought. Power that does not need a perfect setup. Fans started noticing when the finishes stacked up without warning. Early stoppages. Body shots that folded people. Knees that arrived from nowhere. The reputation grew faster than the record. Now every new opponent walks in carrying the weight of every previous disaster. The intrigue is not whether she can win. It is how quickly the next name becomes another chapter in a growing list of women who never want to see her again. This is the fighter the division cannot ignore. This is the danger that keeps rising. Watch what happens when the pressure starts and the distance disappears. The trail is already long. It is about to get longer. She moves like she already knows the ending. The other fighter is still searching for the beginning. That gap in understanding is where the damage lives. Every walkout looks the same. Calm, focused, almost quiet. Then the first leg kick lands or the first jab snaps the head back and the quiet disappears. The cage becomes her space. The opponent becomes a problem she is already solving. Crowds that once watched with curiosity now watch with expectation. They wait for the moment the posture breaks or the eyes change. They wait for the referee to step in. That wait has become part of the show. Dakota Ditcheva does not need to announce herself. The results do the talking. Perfect record. High finish rate. Women who enter with confidence and leave with questions they cannot answer. The mystery is not if she is dangerous. The mystery is how much more dangerous she is still becoming. That is the hook that keeps people locked in. That is the reason the next fight always feels larger than the last. She came from a house where fighting was normal. Her mother held world titles in kickboxing and Muay Thai. The gym was home long before it became a workplace. Young Dakota learned the language of strikes early, then stepped away, then returned with purpose. Junior world gold in Muay Thai followed. Amateur wins stacked clean. When she turned professional, the pattern was immediate. First night, first round, first finish. The next ones followed the same script. Local cards turned into bigger stages. Manchester top team gave her the base. American top team sharpened the edges. She trained beside champions and absorbed the standard. Early professional nights showed the same traits that would later define her. Length used as a weapon, pressure that never eased, finishes that arrived before the opponent could settle. The record stayed perfect. The finishes stayed loud. People outside the United Kingdom started paying attention when the stoppages refused to slow down. Every win carried the same message. This was not a prospect learning on the job. This was a fighter already operating with the tools of a veteran. Reputation built on short nights and damaged opponents. Credibility arrived because the results never needed explanation. Dominance looked natural. Future potential looked obvious. The girl from Sale had become something the flyweight division had to answer for. Her father brought Bulgarian blood and another layer of combat culture. The double flag she carried was not decoration. It was identity. She spoke of both sides of her heritage with quiet pride. Training camps split between Manchester and Florida. The mats in Coconut Creek tested her against larger athletes and sharper minds. She held her own. That environment turned raw talent into something sharper. Early finishes against local competition proved the power. Later nights against imported talent proved the depth. Each victory added another layer to the story. The undefeated streak was not fragile. It was reinforced by every short night and every late stoppage. Opponents began arriving with game plans built around surviving the first round. Most of them failed that test. The ones who lasted longer still left the cage knowing they had been in with something different. Background details that once seemed ordinary now looked like the foundation of something larger. A mother who understood titles. A gym culture that demanded excellence. A transition from pure striking into mixed martial arts that never cost her the edge she already owned. The early chapter closed with a perfect record and a clear message. Dakota Ditcheva was not arriving. She was already here. The real advantage is not one single tool. It is the combination that appears only when the cage door closes. Reach that lets her touch from ranges others cannot. Muay Thai timing that turns every knee and elbow into a problem. Body work that drains the will before the head even becomes the target. She does not rush. She measures. Then the distance collapses and the other fighter is suddenly dealing with volume that does not stop. Pressure without wildness. Accuracy without hesitation. Cardio that stays high while the opponent's options shrink. The style looks simple until you are the one trying to solve it. Long limbs create space. That space becomes a trap. Inside the trap the knees arrive, the elbows cut, the body shots fold posture. Mental toughness shows when the fight gets physical and she still finds the next opening. Fight IQ shows when she switches levels or changes tempo without telegraphing. Opponents leave the cage talking about power they could not see coming and range they could not close. That is the secret. Not just strength. Not just speed. The full package that turns every exchange into her exchange. Once you understand why the finishes keep coming, the rest of the story makes sense. The danger is engineered. She can fight tall and keep the opponent at the end of her strikes. She can close the distance and make the clinch a nightmare. She can switch stances and still find the same openings. The body becomes a target that never stops paying dividends. A liver shot changes breathing. A series of knees changes posture. An elbow changes the look of the face. The opponent starts covering the wrong places. The openings grow larger. Dakota does not force the finish. She creates the conditions where the finish becomes inevitable. That patience is part of the weapon. That confidence is part of the weapon. The ability to stay calm while the other fighter's world shrinks is the part that separates her. Fans who only watched the highlight reel saw the power. Fans who watched the full fight saw the control. Both were correct. The secret weapon is the complete system. Reach, timing, body work, pressure, and the mind that runs it all. That is why the women across from her keep walking into the same problem. That is why the nights keep ending early. That is why the reputation keeps growing. The first professional tests arrived fast. Early opponents carried local reputations and real toughness. They still walked into the same storm. One night the elbows and knees ended the evening before the first round could breathe. Another night the pressure and volume forced the referee in early. A Brazilian with grappling credentials tried to force the fight to the mat and discovered that holding Dakota down is temporary. The elbows found the opening. The stoppage followed. Each early test answered one question and created a larger one. Could she handle pressure? She answered with control. Could she finish when the moment arrived? She answered with violence. The win stayed clean and the night stayed short. Momentum built because nothing slowed her. Every new name arrived with more experience and left with the same result. The pattern became clear to anyone watching. This was not luck. This was a fighter who already knew how to break the will of the woman across from her. The early professional chapter closed with a perfect record and a growing list of women who had felt the full weight of that reach in those knees. The next level was already waiting. Local promotions gave way to larger stages. Imported talent arrived with different styles and different confidence. The results stayed consistent. A fighter who tried to close distance met long kicks and sharp counters. A fighter who tried to grapple met elbows from the bottom and a rapid scramble back to the feet. The cage became a place where Dakota dictated the terms. Early rounds turned into statements. The referee's intervention became familiar. Crowds that once wondered if the hype was real started expecting the finish. That expectation became its own form of pressure for the opponent. Dakota never seemed affected by it. She walked in the same way. She fought the same way. She left the same way. The first major tests proved the foundation was solid. The finishes proved the weapons were real. The undefeated streak proved the mind was ready. Every early win raised the ceiling. Every early stoppage raised the fear. The division started taking notice because the evidence was impossible to ignore. Short nights. Damaged opponents. A fighter who looked more dangerous with every outing. The early chapter was complete. The larger challenges were already forming on the horizon. The stages grew larger. The opponents grew more dangerous. European tournament nights demanded more than early career finishes. A durable Swedish fighter lasted into the later rounds and still met the same body shot that ended the night. The pressure had been constant. The exchanges had been physical. Dakota still found the opening that changed everything. A determined opponent in the final walked in carrying real credentials and left with a doctor's stoppage after the damage became too visible. The first round told the story. Reach. Power. Blood. The referee and the doctor agreed the night was over. American cards brought fresh names with solid records and confidence. Each one discovered the same problem. Distance that refused to close. Pressure that refused to ease. Body shots that arrived when the guard was high. First round finishes kept stacking. A grappler who thought she could force the fight to the floor found the underhooks temporary and the counter strikes permanent. Another striker who tried to match pace found the volume too high and the accuracy too sharp. The escalation was clear. Every new opponent arrived with more experience, more respect, and more reason to believe she could be the one. Every new opponent left with the same result. The stakes rose because the stage rose. Tournament brackets turned into statements. Regular season nights turned into warnings. Dakota's record stayed perfect. Her finish rate stayed high. The women across from her kept learning the same lesson the hard way. Momentum became a living thing. Each win fed the next. Each stoppage raised the expectation for the one after that. The division could no longer treat her as a prospect. She had become a problem that required answers. The answers were not arriving. The pressure she applied in the cage was starting to exist outside it as well. Opponents began preparing for her specifically. Game plans focused on surviving the early storm. Most of those plans failed before the first round ended. The few that lasted longer still ended with Dakota in control and the other fighters searching for solutions that never came. Escalation was no longer a concept. It was the reality of every new matchup. Bigger names. Higher stakes. The same dangerous result. The biggest test arrived with a name that carried real weight. A former UFC title challenger. A fighter with knockouts on her record and experience at the highest level. The Brazilian walked in with confidence and a clear plan. She wanted the body lock. She wanted the mat. She wanted to drag the fight into deep water. For moments it looked like the plan might work. The clinch formed. The underhooks appeared. Dakota had to work. The struggle was real. Then the space opened again and the long limbs went back to work. The first round stayed competitive on the surface. The second round told the truth. Dakota's body shots started landing with purpose. The Brazilian's posture changed. The breathing changed. The confidence changed. A series of punches to the ribs and midsection removed the last of the resistance. The referee stepped in. The tournament was over. The $1 million prize was hers. The first British woman to claim an MMA world title stood in the center of the cage with the proof written across the other fighter's body. This was the moment that could have changed everything. A loss would have slowed the rise. A close decision would have invited questions. Instead, the finish arrived and the questions disappeared. The climax of the story was not a narrow escape. It was another demonstration that the danger had only grown. Tension built in the early exchanges. Uncertainty lived in the clinch battles. Anticipation peaked when the body work started connecting. Then the stoppage delivered the answer the crowd already suspected. Dakota Ditcheva had passed the hardest test of her career and made it look like another step rather than a ceiling. The reputation that once belonged to a prospect now belonged to a champion. The fear factor that once lived in regional cages now lived on the world stage. This was the night the division fully understood what it was dealing with. The outcome was decisive. The title was secured. The record stayed perfect. Yet the story did not end in that cage. A later night against a durable opponent went the full distance and still ended with Dakota's hand raised. The decision was clear. The control was constant. The message remained the same. Even when the finish did not arrive, the dominance did. The undefeated streak continued. The reputation continued to expand. Future challenges already wait on the horizon. Larger names. Different styles. Higher expectations. The next woman who steps in will carry the knowledge of every previous disaster and the hope that she can be the first to solve the problem. That hope has become thinner with every outing. Dakota Ditcheva now walks into every fight as the standard the division must measure itself against. The long reach is still there. The bodywork is still there. The pressure is still there. The mind that runs the system is still improving. Legacy is no longer a future conversation. It is forming in real time. A British champion who finished her way to the top. A fighter who turned every major test into another demonstration of control. The cage still waits. The next opponent still prepares. The audience still expects the same outcome. That expectation is the final proof of how far she has come. The danger is no longer a rumor. It is a record. It is a title. It is a list of women who will never forget the night they shared the cage with her. The next chapter will only raise the stakes further. Bigger stages. Stronger resistance. The same rising force. Dakota Ditcheva is not finished. The division is still learning what that means.